My video titled, Unlocking the Mystery of Money and Debt Creation, reveals the unseen, and somewhat purposely hidden side of our increasing debt. When you see the reason for it, you will wonder why you have not noticed this before, and you will see it everywhere. It's on every news channel, and it's impossible not to be aware that the people in our country, or for that matter most people in the world, are slowly getting crushed in a mountain of debt. Student loan debt, credit card debt, housing debt, and let's not forget government debt. And that debt is increasing. We live in one of the richest countries in the world. But we are drowning in increasing debt, and we appear helpless to do anything about it. None of our leaders or economic advisors have any genuine plans to stop this rising debt, let alone reduce it.
What you are looking at is a chart that shows the increasing amount of debt in the United States from 1950 till now. According to the Federal Reserve System, as of October 2023, the United States currently has accumulated over $98 trillion of debt. That debt includes both private and public debt. Is it possible the real cause for this increasing debt is something we are not willing to consider? I hope to show you it is. When we look at this chart, most of us assume this $98 trillion in debt came from billions of different transactions between people, business, and governments, where one party who has money then lends that money to another party that needs money. Surprisingly, this is not how most debt is created. Most of our debt is created in a completely different way. That other way of debt creation, for reasons that will become obvious, few people are willing to talk about. But it is the very reason for the magnitude of our debt.
This PowerPoint movie just walks you through how most debt is really created. What you will find is this process works surprisingly different from what we always assumed. Just think about this. How is it even possible to accumulate $98 trillion of debt? Can you even borrow that much money? What if the government confiscated all cash and coins, plus all the money in everyone's bank accounts and used that to pay our debts? How much money do you think we would still have left to pay? 78 trillion. Grab a seat and watch the mystifying process of how our debts are multiplied. This video is free from politics and contains no conspiracy theories. The math is easy, there is no bookkeeping involved, but like a good mystery, following the debt creation process will take some surprising turns. I tried to make a shorter version of this video, but making it shorter made it much harder to understand. Just so you know up front, I am not promoting, selling, or receiving any income from this video. This video is uninterrupted and ad-free. Any ads you see are not mine. Please, just sit back and enjoy the show. Part 1. Seeing the problem.
The most obvious place to start looking for answers is to begin with the holders of this debt. Changing the word debt to the term loans will make the problem somewhat easier to see. Who are the major holders of these loans? If you want to borrow money, where do you go? A bank. Most of the debt we owe is in a form of loans to the banking system.
Banking is not just a matter of one person depositing and another person borrowing that money. If it actually worked that way, our total debt would be dramatically reduced. Let's see why.
Most people are fuzzy about how money and banking work together. A good share of us assume there is something that we think of as money in the banking system, and banks just move it around and lend it. This is not true. We also assume when we go to a bank for a loan, the money they gave us came from someone else's deposit. This is also not true. Some others might know that our banks operate under what is called the fractional reserve system. Fractional reserve banking by definition admits the money in the system is backed only at a fraction of its face value. This is true. Let's think about that. Do we actually understand the process that allows our deposits to be backed by only a fraction of their value? Let me start with a quote from the famous industrialist, capitalist, and financier, Henry Ford.
It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning.
What Henry Ford knew about then is even more true for today. But now our modern banking practices, with its digital dollars, have made it much more difficult to perceive. What aspect of our money system did he think would cause a revolt? Let's find out. First, what is money? Let's keep it simple. No theory. No confusing terms. Money is what we use to buy things. Simple enough. We basically use only two forms of money. We either pay cash, or we use what is termed demand deposits. Cash consists of all printed money and coin. Demand deposits are basically just IOUs from your bank. These deposits can be withdrawn at any time. These types of funds are usually transferred by either checks, debit cards, direct bank transfer. Credit cards are not officially considered money since they are just basically loans to be paid off later by demand deposits. Now let's look at this a different way. This is a pie chart of what is generally considered the total U.S. money in circulation. It consists of $19.6 trillion. $17.4 trillion are demand deposits at financial institutions. This is the orange part of the pie chart. $2.2 trillion consists of Federal Reserve notes and coin currently in circulation. This is the blue part of the pie chart. Pretty simple. Basically, money consists of two totally different things: printed dollars, or cash; digital dollars, or demand deposits. So far, all this makes perfect sense. Since printed dollars only count for 11% of our money, and printed dollars are not what is causing our debt problem, let's concentrate our discussion on what are digital dollars, or bank book money, or commonly referred to as demand deposits. Who actually is the source of these $17 trillion in demand deposits? It would seem obvious, the source of all these deposits must be the banking customers, but is that really true?
Let's go back to the screen. Let's make it more realistic. Deposits into banks are mostly in the form of check, debit cards, or direct bank transfers, so let's change that. Where did this bank deposit come from? Was the depositor the source of this deposit? It certainly appears so. Let me add something that changes everything. I need to add a second bank. This is what actually happens when you make a deposit in your bank account. You are not the source of the deposit. All you did is just enable the transfer of already existing deposits from Sam's bank to Joe's bank. The total deposits in the banking system did not change one penny, although those deposits did change banks, whether it's a check, debt card, or a direct bank transfer. Even your wife's trip to a local shop. Just moves existing deposits from one bank to another. It is impossible for depositors to create any deposits. The more you think about it, the more you realize how obvious it is that checks, debit cards, or bank transfers are only created to transfer already existing deposits. We are now back to the original question. If the banking system did not get these deposits from their banking customers, where did all these $17 trillion in digital deposits come from?
The banking system creates them. All of them. 100% of them. All $17.4 trillion. Most of us mistakenly think that our government is the largest creator of money, but you will shortly see that our government, including our Federal Reserve, are very small players in the money creation process. Although our Federal Reserve does have a role in the formation of bank deposits, it is the commercial banking system that creates them. So how do the commercial banks create all these deposits? And what does all this have to do with our trillions in debt? That's what I am about to show you, and you can decide for yourself. The only way you can understand this process is to watch the number of deposits and loans in each individual local bank. But at the same time, watch how the total number of deposits and loans for the whole banking system magically increases with each consecutive bank. Let's watch how the magic is done.
Part 2. How our debts are multiplied. I know the next 3 minutes will seem ultra boring, but without these 3 minutes, you will find what happens next too crazy to grasp. You are about to see how private banks create trillions of real dollars without anybody noticing. Let's go. To start this process, we will simply use a cash deposit, but normally this would be done through the Federal Reserve's Open Market Committee. Our first depositor is Terry. He will be depositing $1,000 in cash that he has earned from his garage sale.
It's time to put on your thinking cap and watch how our banking system can create $17 trillion without anybody noticing. Let's go. The piggy bank symbol represents individual local banks. The little running man shows the movement of deposits. Terry is depositing $1,000 into bank number 1. Bank number 1 owes Terry $1,000 in bank deposits. Everything seems fine. Similar to your checking deposit register, this banking system register keeps track of all bank deposits and loans for the whole banking system. This will give us a behind-the-scene view of what we have never even thought about before. Now that Terry deposited $1,000 in bank number 1, the banking system has now gained $1,000. Everything seems fine. Our fractional reserve banking system requires all banks to separate a certain percentage of each bank's deposits and move to their reserve account at the Federal Reserve. For our purpose, we will choose a reasonable 10% ratio, although that ratio varies and is actually set by the Federal Reserve. The bank then has $100 in its Federal Reserve account, and under our fractional reserve system is allowed to lend the $900 that's left. All this seems logical. And everything seems fine. Harry needs a loan for car repairs. Harry signs agreement to pay back loan. Bank number 1 gives Harry a loan for $900. The banking system now has $900 in total loans. Everything seems fine. Harry now pays AAA car repair shop with a check from bank number 1. AAA car repair now has $900 to deposit. Everything seems fine, but it's not. Do you notice what just happened? It will soon be obvious.
I warned you the first part is boring. Everything you have seen so far is just to prepare you for the next slides. What you will watch next is an amazing shell game, or it could also be called a bait and switch. Bankers have used this to create trillions of dollars and nobody even notices. What they do is so amazingly simple that our minds almost reject the process, even when we see it with our own eyes, but it is the very reason we have so much debt.
You are now ready to see what investment consultant Major L.B. Angus called the most astounding piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. AAA car repair deposits check in bank number 2. The banking system now has a $900 deposit. Now something is really strange. Can you see it? We only started with $1,000, but we now have $1,900 in demand deposits. Where did this extra $900 in deposits come from? How can this be? You are now starting to see how our banking system magically creates demand deposits. This process is amazing. We just got started, and we are only at the second bank. The second bank is now able to make a loan. As before, in order to make a loan, bank number 2 is required to separate 10% of its new $900 deposit out of its accounts into its Federal Reserve account. Tim applies for a school loan. Bank number 2 gives Tim a check for $810. Tim's new $810 loan has increased the total loans for the banking system. We only started with a $1,000 deposit, but our loans have now reached $1,710. Where did the banking system get this extra money to lend us? In just one more bank, that answer will become obvious. Tim now takes the loan money he received from bank number 2 and pays his U of M tuition. The U of M now has $810 to deposit. Let's watch what just happened here one more time. Most of us are under the impression that the source of bank deposits originates from banking customers, but we can watch Tim's loan money magically become an ordinary deposit as soon as Tim pays the U of M. Tim now pays his U of M tuition with a check from bank number 2. The U of M now has $810 to deposit. You can now see how loans are the real source of deposits. All banking customers do is move those deposits from bank to bank. For now, let's just move on. The U of M now has an $810 deposit in bank number 3. Terry originally only deposited $1,000 in cash, but in only 3 banks that deposit has been transformed into $2,710 of bank deposits. What actually happened to Terry's original deposit?
You can see all of the original money is technically left both bank number 1 and bank number 2. The Federal Reserve System has $190 of bank number 1 and bank number 2's money, but that money is unusable to those banks because it must stay there to meet their reserve and capital requirements. Bank number 3 now has $810 of the original new money deposited. That $810 will just continue creating new money as it moves from bank to bank, if it continues at that same 10% reserve rate. Our banking system will create 9 real bank dollars for every $1 of government money. Remember, I told you government is a small player in the money creation business. Watching the money creation in the banking system is like watching a shell game. You can't understand it by looking at single banks. I know it is hard to wrap your mind around this system. If you want verification of this, just Google deposit multiplier. Let's move on. While the banks are surely inflating our money supply, their creation of these real digital or bookkeeping dollars is not the most harmful effect from this system, so let's continue.
Bank number 3 now has the U of M's $810 deposit. As required, bank number 3 splits off 10% and moves it to its Federal Reserve account. Jane applies for a vacation loan. Bank number 3 can now loan Jane $729. The banking system has now gained another $729 in loans. With only a $1,000 deposit, the banking system has now loaned us $2,439.
For every $1 of central bank money. If our banking system keeps 10% of its deposits in reserve, it can create $9 in loans.
Are you starting to see how we can have so much debt?
When we zoom into the banking system register, we see the loans from the previous bank. Are creating the deposits in the next bank. I know this new way of seeing our banking system makes most of our heads explode. Part 3. How our money is strangely exchanged for debt. If you are still wrestling with how loans could ever be the source of deposits, let's look at this process again, but in a simpler way. I know this sounds crazy. Let's just watch what happens when one single dollar is put into circulation by our central bank. This is going to create some extremely unforeseeable results when it is deposited into our fractional reserve banking system. Why not make the process more interesting by using a slot machine to simulate each consecutive individual bank's transaction? What does this screen show us? Let's walk through the deposit creation again, but with just $1. $1 is deposited in bank number 1. Bank number 1 puts at least 10 cents into its account at the Federal Reserve to meet its reserve or bank capital requirement. Bank number 1 can legally make a loan for 90 cents. How much money do you see here? Let's have someone add them up.
The depositor has $1. The Federal Reserve portion stays with Federal Reserve, so is out of circulation, and it's not counted. The loan will be lent and spent and will be deposited in the next bank, 90 cents. Total money in circulation, $1.90. Bankers will insist that the deposit is a liability of the bank. And the loan is an asset, so no money is created. All we have to do to settle this is move to the next bank and watch the banking system total. As soon as the 90-cent loan money is spent, it becomes a 90-cent deposit. When we add the $1 deposit, which the original depositor still has in the previous bank, with our new 90-cent deposit, we get a total of $1.90. Just like a winning slot machine, whenever a bank makes a loan, new money is created. While the banking system is creating new real dollars and puffing up our money supply, there is actually a much more disturbing effect that few people are willing to talk about, and that is the main point of this whole video. What just happened? Without our knowledge, we are sinking into debt. We originally deposited only $1 in the bank, but now we can see from the total loans column on the slot machine that we currently owe $1.71 to the banking system. The result of us enabling banks to use fractional reserve banking is a drastic increase in our debts. So how much debt can they create from one single dollar, assuming 10% reserve ratio? Let's see. After the second bank receives its 90-cent deposit from the first bank, it puts 10% of that in its Federal Reserve account, and it can then lend out 81 cents. That 81-cent loan will be cashed and spent, and then redeposited in the next bank. This system just keeps repeating over and over. We are currently only at the fourth bank. And although we only placed $1 in the bank to hold, the banking system has now loaned us over 3 times what we gave them. Are you finding it easy to see why we have so much debt? Have you ever wondered why nobody explained this process to you before? Now let's speed this up. At the 8th bank, the banking system has increased our loans over 5 times what we originally gave them. With each consecutive bank, we become more in debt to the banking system. Let's keep going but faster. Once the initial deposit is made by the central bank, all the rest of these new dollars are automatically created by the commercial banks without any government participation at all. And the loans are created completely apart from any saving or deposit transferring programs that would normally in any other business be necessary. What you are currently watching is a visual look at what economists refer to as the money multiplier. What they all fail to mention, it's also a huge debt multiplier. That $1 from our central bank has now been transformed into almost $9 of debt. Most of us assumed government was the money creator. And now we see that fractional reserve banking purposely takes government money out of circulation, and then replaces it with their own bank money, which is the only money we have left to use for our everyday transactions. Technically, we still could use cash, but cash is almost impossible to use for anything other than small transactions. When banks are making loans, they are not expanding credit. That's what credit cards do. Banks are actually creating real dollars. These dollars obviously have the same value and purchasing power as the dollars printed and created by our Federal Reserve. But these dollars are borrowed dollars. Unlike government dollars, they are not free for us to use. Someone, somewhere is paying interest for the use of every one of these banking-created dollars. In addition, the number of these dollars created by commercial banks is vastly more than the ones created by government or the Federal Reserve. The $17 trillion created by the commercial banks, in the form of demand deposits, is just the base of the iceberg. The problem of allowing private organizations to legally create money with bookkeeping entries does not stop here. To keep things simple, we have only discussed how demand deposits are created. We have not even mentioned other forms of created deposits, such as money market funds, repurchase agreements, commercial paper, bankers' acceptances, Eurodollars. But let's keep focused on demand deposits, and save those for another video.
It's not my intention to give anyone the impression everything banks do is bad, or that we should try to eliminate banks. Local banks are not the problem. Banks today provide many worthwhile and needed services, which they deserve to get paid for. Banks provide ATM services, check clearing. They supply credit and debit cards. They exchange foreign currency. They give investment consulting. They supply guaranteed bank funds when necessary. Plus, they maintain online and mobile banking services. But if we are at all serious about reducing our debts, then we will need a source of debt-free money, which according to our Constitution, is the government's right and responsibility to create.
Now you know the real reason why we are on a roller coaster ride of increasing debt, and why our leaders can never come up with a working plan to reduce it. Under our current fractional reserve banking system, to have money, you must have debt. I hope you can now see that no matter what we do with the so-called cash in our system, even if we back it with gold and diamonds, it will have little effect on our debt problem.
You can clearly see the operation of private banks creating demand deposits multiplies our debts significantly. You will not see this fact ever mentioned on the nightly news. We have given the banking system the right to create money, and then lend what they have created to us. The penalty for printing paper dollars is 15 years in prison, yet we allow our banking system to create trillions of them, with no penalty. Nobody notices or even cares. If we are actually trying to get out of debt, this is a horrible system. The reason for this video was to remove the smoke and mirrors from our monetary system, and give you a clearer picture of how it really works. It is 100% impossible to get out of debt when our money is created by loans. We have reached the finish line now. Let's put all this in perspective. Our world is faced with a lot of problems that have no easy solutions. I am afraid this is probably just one of those. Should fixing our banking system be a top priority? Maybe it should be, but it's not. Will it ever get fixed? Probably not, but fixing it is impossible if no one understands it. Who knows, maybe if enough regular people that are not profiting from the system actually understood it, something could change. Main part of video is over. If you need more supplemental proof to verify the accuracy of this video, I have compiled another short video that simply consists of statements by US presidents, economists, professors, political leaders, and bankers who throughout history that have also informed us about the issues associated with allowing private banks to create and issue money. I certainly wish our government would create a debt-free money system for us, but whether just out of ignorance, or on purpose, it has just entrusted that power to the bankers. I hope this will help convince you, and give you a broader historical perspective of the whole banking issue. That supplemental video is on my channel and simply called, Famous Quotes About Banking, Money and Debt Creation. You are currently looking at version 1.1 of this video. Back in the early 1980s I wrote a short book that pointed out the misconceptions we all have on how what we call money is created. It showed the actual process of how our commercial banking system, not the government, creates our current monetary system. I tried to make it easy to understand. That book was never published because I found this concept of bank deposit creation too hard for most people to grasp, or even believe, and to be honest, very few people were interested. In the winter of 2022, I got the idea to convert some of the book to a PowerPoint movie because the money creation concept is much easier to see visually than to read in a book. That is what you are watching. Now that you have seen this, you can see how foolish any discussion is of how to fix our increasing debt problem, if we do not take into account how creating demand deposits multiplies these debts significantly. If you have ideas on how this presentation could be expressed any clearer, please email me. Thanks for watching. This educational video is free to share, but if you do decide to do so, I would appreciate it if you would send me an email, so I can be sure to notify you when the video is upgraded, and it will be. The upgraded title for this educational video will always end with Mystery of Money and Debt Creation, and will be on my channel. I will never share your email. Email me at visuallookatmoney@gmail.com. My YouTube channel name is Mystery of money, debt creation and other crimes. A website might be set up if there is any interest in this subject. The images in this video could be subject to copyright if you use them apart from this video.